When I was a kid in Mexico, we loved to play hide and seek with all of the kids in the neighborhood at night. The houses were so close together that you could jump from roof to roof. And with everyone being friendly and knowing each other, they wouldn't mind if we did get on the roof. We had my cousins come over for dinner, and our parents were just out on the porch having a couple of drinks. Some of the kids came over and asked if we wanted to play. It was already dark out, and this is when we especially like to play, so we agreed. There was this one girl I had a thing for, who also happened to join that night. I knew if I could get her alone, I might have a chance to kiss her. I knew she liked me too, so it would all work out. We all gathered in the middle of the street and randomly chose who would count. Then all the other kids would run and hide. So as the kids started counting, I looked at the girl, waving at her to come follow me. Holding my hand, I led her to my aunt's house, which was vacant at the time. She was on vacation, and I knew the house was empty, and I didn't see any other kids go in there. The front door was locked, so we ran to the back and checked if it was locked too, and it was. But at the back of my house, my aunt had an old washing machine, and I knew we could get in from her roof. I helped her up first, and when she got up, we could hear someone coming, so I told her to go and hide, and she ran off. I was able to make it on the roof not long after, and I knew for sure someone was searching the house next to my aunt's. My aunt was having the second story redone, so I hid in a half-completed bathroom. I thought I was alone, but I felt someone grab my hand. It was pitch black in there, and I couldn't see who it was, but I heard a soft voice whisper,
"It's just me. Don't worry."
It was most definitely her, so she squeezed my hand a little more. We hid for some time, and it was great. Then, from afar, we could hear all the kids saying that they gave up. We had won the round. I came out of the bathroom and looked down the street where all the other kids were. That's when I saw her, clear as day, looking at me. I froze. If she was down there, whose hand am I holding? Slowly turning my head, I can still feel the grip of whoever's hand I was holding. With it still being dark, I managed to see the glow of two eyes looking straight at me, without a face. I wasn't the only one to see it. When I got down from the roof and jumped down to where all the kids were, they were all pointing up and behind me, asking who it was. They could see the red eyes too. We stopped playing immediately and went back inside one of the other kids' houses. I met this very awesome guy near Christmas time 2013 in Oakland, California, while fleeing a bad situation in Arizona. We were immediately in our own world, falling in love fast, when the reality of his divorce and process and some of my own circumstances started to interfere. Our whirlwind lasted a glorious 3 months, but our connection had been incredible and instant. When I stopped seeing him, he started drinking very heavily and got sick. We were both bummed it didn't work out, but said goodbye on very good terms. When I returned to Arizona in 2014 and was busing to work at night, I saw him, the night of a gorgeous full moon in December, no less. I was walking from the bus stop to work when I saw someone standing in the corner up ahead, looking down at a cell phone. This alone was odd, because I never saw anyone on this stretch at this time of night. The closer I got, the more I realized it was the guy from Oakland. I couldn't understand why he would be in Arizona, or how he found exactly where I was at this moment. My stride quickened. as I was excited to approach and maybe talk to this person. But when I got about 50 yards away and could see that it was definitely him, aside from this strange softness to the skin on the face he didn't normally have, the haircut, sideburns, his height, build, shoes, and clothes were incredibly uncanny. He looked up from his phone directly at me and then took off at a full run up the adjacent street. I hurried to the corner, looked down the street that he had run up, and saw absolutely no one. This was a Friday night. I would work the weekends, group home for foster youth, and return home on Sunday mornings. When I got home, I took a very long nap, as that was my routine at the time. When I woke up, I saw that I had received messages from the guy in Oakland, out of the blue. He said that he had been thinking of me since it was Christmas time again, and that he wanted to say hi. I asked what he had been doing that Friday, and he said that he had simply worked, gone home, and gone to bed. I told him what I experienced, and he had no more answers than I did. I had several dreams later that someone was relaying his passing on to me at a party in Oakland, but shrugged it off as my own fears towards his struggle with alcohol. Nonetheless, I run Google checkups on him every once in a while just in case. This past winter, I found out that he had passed away at the age of 41 in 2021. I'm not sure how. A tragic accident is passively cited in his obituary, and will likely never ask, but it feels like I was being warned and did nothing to reach out to him. I was quite unaware of doppelganger folklore at the time, but had so many theories. This all fits the classic doppelganger definition so well, so I thought I would share. My mother grew up in the Mexican countryside on a ranch where houses were scattered far apart, and nighttime brought pitch-black darkness due to the absence of streetlights. One day, she was walking to a party with her brother and sister in the early afternoon, when it wasn't dark yet. As they made their way through the remote area, my mom happened to glance up at the sky and noticed a mysterious light moving about. She kept the sighting to herself, knowing all too well that it was rumored to be a witch, a common belief in many parts of Mexico. They get to the party and enjoyed it, momentarily forgetting about the odd sight. However, when the party ended around midnight, they began their journey back home through the now pitch-black countryside. Halfway there, the inexplicable light appeared in the sky once more, and this time, her siblings also saw it. They continued walking in silence, not daring to mention the eerie sight to one another. Then, out of the blue, my mom tripped and turned to look behind her, catching a fleeting glimpse of a mysterious lady. Almost instantaneously, the figure transformed into a glowing light and ascended into the sky, all of this happening in a matter of seconds. This happened in my childhood home in an urban neighborhood in Veracruz, Mexico. We have since moved out. We shared walls with our neighbors, and my room's window on the second floor was facing our back neighbor's roof. This is in southeastern Mexico, where houses are designed to have large windows to let cool air in. It happened on Christmas morning, 2005, when I was 10 years old. I woke up around 4:30 a.m., with the anticipation of finding Christmas presents under the Christmas tree. I found my presents under the tree and brought them up to my room. As I began unwrapping them, I felt a presence coming from the window. I turned my head towards the window and saw some sort of white humanoid entity staring at me from our neighbor's roof. It was all white and seemed to be about 6'4", with no facial features. although I could feel it staring at me. I screamed and closed my eyes. When I opened my eyes again, it was gone. I used up all the bravery I had in me and got up close to the windows and shades, then became unable to move or sleep until sunrise around 6. I tried telling my parents about it, but it just got dismissed as me being imaginative. Ever since, I get terrible anxiety if the shades or windows are open when I try to sleep, and I still don't fully understand what I saw. A few years ago, my family and I were driving in the Canyonlands at night. This was near Kayenta, Arizona. For those who haven't driven that stretch of road at night, it's pitch black since the road is in the valley of the canyon, and the canyon walls shield any ambient light except from the stars above. The road is also long and winding, so it's a white-knuckle drive. Anyway, about 10 minutes into the drive, my brother, who was driving, and I navigating in the front seat, noticed these fluorescent orbs surrounding the car. They were yellow, but maybe more of a highlighter color. My first thought was some sort of insect, like fireflies, but the orbs would form patterns, like they would all group up, then disperse, then reformate around the car. The whole car was bathed in their light. We never felt fear or danger, but they were there for a good 30 minutes, and perhaps 10 to 15 miles. Ironically, we got into a major accident 3 days later, not too far from there, in the same vehicle. Everyone walked out with minor injuries when the first responders expected 5 people dead. It was the early summer of 2004, and I was living in Flagstaff, Arizona. My studio happened to be close to Buffalo Park, which is part of an amazing meadow on the southeastern base of Mount Eldon that almost completely fills with sunflowers during the summer months. It's a beautiful spot of land. This is where I would go for my morning runs because there is a measured 2-mile loop around the meadow. Most often, I would run up from my studio up to the park, do the 2-mile loop twice, then run home to complete 6 miles. It was the kind of morning you would expect from a mountain town in early summer at sunrise, and I was starting my usual running route near the intersection of Cedar and West. I hopped onto the trail that wraps around the high school and goes uphill alongside Cedar to a footbridge that crosses over it and leads directly into the front gates of Buffalo Park. It felt really good to breathe that air in and hear the memorable sound of my feet going over that bridge. Great vibes. As I approached the entrance, I veered right around the big water tank on a secondary trail that skirts the main gate because there was a big family clogging the way. Since I was already treading to the right, I took the counterclockwise option around the Buffalo Park loop. I would choose this direction most often because that puts a nice calf-burning climb in the last leg of the loop. Everything about the run was typical. A few other runners, some cyclists heading straight through on the Arizona Trail, and a handful of young moms with strollers. I had already finished 1 lap and was about to close the second lap, which involves that climb I mentioned at the end. To get that climb, one has to take a right at a fork in the path and run down into a small gully, then run up the other steeper side. This gully is filled with trees, pine, oak, aspen, and some underbrush. This gully is also filled with squirrels as a result, and I privately called it the Squirrel Holler portion of the trail. I veered right at the fork and headed down into the trees of Squirrel Holler. I instantly had the sense I was going to have some kind of interaction in there, so I wiped my nose of any drips and held myself up a bit straighter, as one does, because the trail is more snug there, and I aim to be inspiring more than repulsive. I ran farther in, but still couldn't hear or see any other runners yet, only the squirrels barking overhead. The trail goes down, crosses the gully, and immediately cuts up to the left. And it was as I came upon this junction that I saw what I had been sensing. Coming up on my right, from farther downhill, was a white shape moving through the trees along the base of the gully. At first, I thought I was seeing a large man running hunched over under a white blanket or something. But just after a moment, I noticed there were no legs underneath, and the shape wasn't as defined as a blanket. I gauged its speed and trajectory, and realized I would absolutely collide with it where the trail crosses, so I slowed to a stop. This is when I got a really good look at what I was seeing. It was similar to white fog or smoke, but also kind of shimmery or pearlescent. It was roughly 8 to 10 feet across and about my height of 5'7", and thickly transparent. I stood still as it moved with determination between the trees and approached the path, when it suddenly stopped right at the edge and just stayed there, roiling expectantly. I was all chills, and my neck hairs were standing up, and my mind was going at what I was seeing. But I somehow got the notion that this interaction was a question of courtesy. So I instinctively bowed a bit, and motioned with both of my hands for this cloud to have the right of way. And that shimmering mass of mist picked up and continued its course over the trail and up the gully. I watched it for a second or two and continued with slower steps than usual up around the trail and eventually out of sight of this thing. The last I saw, it seemed to be heading into a denser area of undergrowth. I ran out into the sun, toward the front gate, and kept throwing glances back to see if anything cloud-like was coming out of the trees or zooming over the meadow. But there was nothing noticeable, and no other people were responding to anything strange. For the whole final mile back to my studio, I just went over and over the event and didn't even register my surroundings as I ran. I could only see this strange, sparkly, wet, misty, amorphous shape waiting patiently for me to yield the right of way. It was almost like bad special effects from the 80s, and I still laugh to this day. My girlfriend and I were camping in a nice place right next to the Blue River in the White Mountains of Arizona on Saturday, September 9th. We were getting ready to go to bed when at about 9 p.m., we heard this profoundly human-like pitch whistle noise. It would raise up and down in pitch in perfect rhythm. About 1 second of raised pitch, 1 second of lowered pitch, then like 2 seconds of silence. Repeat. The whistle only happened a total of 4 times before it suddenly disappeared. Not only did the whistle change pitch, but it also moved. 1 second it was far from the campsite and harder to hear, and then the next it was like it was 40 feet from the tent. I looked on the internet and even asked ChatGPT what it thought of the situation. Both were completely stumped and had no real explanation. Also, there wasn't anyone else near us, and the closest that other people would have been was about a mile away, and there was no wind all night. In 2013, I worked as a baker at a small cafe in Prescott, Arizona, called the Wild Iris, still in business. It was a super old building and had a reputation for being haunted among staff. I was quite skeptical at the time about all things paranormal, but also curious, so I spent a week or so inquiring fellow coworkers about their experiences. I would hear stories from other bakers who would come in at 4 a.m., unable to get the lights to work until the 5 a.m. barista arrived. Other stories included things like rags flying off the countertops or moving around while people turned away. Creepy, but not convincing. I remember feeling compelled to have my own experience and felt energetically open to invite something paranormal to happen. During that time, I was scheduled after hours with 2 other coworkers to dust the air ducts. We were instructed to throw tarps over everything so the dust wouldn't dirty the workspaces. I was in the bakery, which was essentially a tiny workspace connected to the coffee area. I threw a large tarp over one of the rolling speed racks, a tall portable shelving unit, that was filled with empty squeeze bottles for caramel and chocolate sauces. Once I got to the top of my stepladder to begin dusting, I noticed a single squeeze bottle sitting on top of the tarp. There was no storage above the speed rack, so I had no idea how that bottle managed to get on top of the tarp that I had just thrown over it. I was so baffled, and so were my coworkers. However, I wasn't convinced it was a ghost. The next night, I was scheduled and told everyone about my experience. Eventually, it was just me and one other coworker, the barista, closing the shop. There was only one customer left on the opposite side of the room. I think it was a young man reading by the front door. We spent all night discussing paranormal stuff and really creeping ourselves out. It got to the point where I had to stop talking about things with her because I was so unnerved by the energy that we were stirring up. Shortly thereafter, I bent over to get a trash bag out of the cabinet beneath the sink when I heard a noise from behind and above me. It sounded like a woman's voice, but a combination of a growl and spoken words, and it was textural. I have never heard anything like it before. It was like someone was speaking from another dimension, almost staticky. I immediately froze and spent a few seconds trying to logically understand what I had just heard. I knew it wasn't the song playing on the radio because it was much louder than that, and I knew it wasn't my coworker behind me. But after finding no other explanation, I turned around and faced her and said, "What was that noise?" My coworker looked at me and said, "I thought that was you." We both froze in disbelief, and at that time, we were both equidistant from the espresso bar that had several coffee cups stacked on top. After a couple of seconds of just staring at each other, we both noticed something on top of the espresso bar moving and looked at the same time. One of the cups floated a couple of inches into the air, wiggled a bit side to side, and then lowered itself back down. We both looked at each other to confirm what we had just seen, and then ran to the bathroom on the side of the building, laughing hysterically, flooded with adrenaline. I was just so utterly in awe of what had just happened. I remember saying out loud something like, "Okay, I get it now. I believe you." Not the scariest thing ever, but to this day, remains the most bizarre and unexplainable thing I have ever witnessed.